you can see as these questions are asked, there's a lot of great conversation that's coming out of that, these nugs of whiz, as I like to call them, that are great takeaways for all of you that are seeking to implement them and get some good takeaways from today. So next up, we have Alex Marmor, who is a co-founder and education director teaching happiness with Dr. Laurie Santos at Yale University. And Alex Marmor is the education director for Yale University's Teaching Happiness, a free well-being program for teens created with the renowned psychology professor, Dr. Laurie Santos, and he previously co-founded Wireless Philosophy, a Khan Academy partner with Philosophy Education. Alex specializes in expanding educational content to the public and has a track record of working across various domains, including educational technology, academia, social impact, psychology, philosophy, and music, a man after my heart. He holds an MA in philosophy and from Brandeis University and a BA in philosophy from Boston University.
Thanks, Abdul. Are you able to hear me well? Is my mic good? All right, awesome. Then I'm going to quickly share my screen so that I can show you my slides. Give me just a second. Perfect. All right, so we should be able to see my slide now. Abdul, can you give me a thumbs up when it's there? All right.
Well, awesome. It was, but oh,
good now?
No, something happened, but it was up there.
Sorry about this. All right.
Yes.
Now, okay, perfect. Golden. Thank you. Well, hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here, and thanks for the intro, Abdul. I was going to give a little overview, and that saved me a bit of time, so thanks. My name's Alex. I'm happy to talk to you today, and I think this is, I'm really happy about the order the talks have gone in today. I think this is going to be a little bit different from what we've heard so far, which is awesome. So my name's Alex. I work on a curriculum at Yale called Teaching Happiness, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. But first, I am going to tell you a little bit more about who Laurie Santos is. So Laurie Santos is a professor of psychology at Yale. She is host of the Happiness Lab podcast, which is a pretty popular podcast. It's got, I think now, like 100 million downloads. It's a top Apple podcast. She's also creator of the Science of Wellbeing, which is, I think, one of the most popular courses in the world. It's got 4.5 million people enrolled. It's on Coursera.org, and it's completely free. So I'm hoping some of you may have heard of some of these things. So what is Teaching Happiness? Teaching Happiness is, like we've heard, a free evidence-based happiness curriculum for high school teachers. For now, I'm going to leave it there. I'll tell you a bit more about it first. But first, I want to tell you a bit more later. But first, I want to talk about what my goal is today. My goal is to share a little bit about what we've learned about specifically how to build effective well-being education products. So a lot of my background is in building stuff. The caveat here is that our products are free. They're online, they're academic, they're evidence-based, they're teen-facing, they're both practical and theoretical, and they're somewhat bootstrapped, which means we have funding for salaries and stuff, but we don't have a lot of ad money. We don't have a lot of money for web development. So I mention this caveat only because what I know is specific to this kind of space and these parameters. So what's the big problem that motivates our work? It's that 37% of teens struggle with mental health. This is from a CDC report that came out, I think, earlier this year, maybe late last year. And this presents us with a big question, which is how can we help teens feel better? We've got an answer to this, and we think that it's by teaching teens about the science of well-being. And we mean something very specific. We mean what the science says, we mean how to apply that science, and we mean all of that in community with others. So what does this end up looking like? Well, our content, specifically our curriculum, covers 6 buckets of information. The first is misconceptions about money, grades, and social media and how those interact with well-being. It covers biases, so how to have healthier comparisons and deal with the fact that we have limited attention. Covers behaviors that are pro well-being, like social connection, doing what you love, getting enough sleep and exercise. We focus on thoughts like gratitude, mindfulness, and gaining perspective. So that's thoughts, it's attitudes. We talk about feelings. So we spend a lot of time on how to regulate the fight-flight response using the breath when we're feeling stressed. And we also talk about goals and how to build better habits and hack existing habits. So we start with, okay, what do we believe about happiness that's probably wrong? What's all the right stuff about happiness? And then how do we take what we learned and actually integrate it into our lives? Now, does this work? Yes. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this, but I wanted to include this slide only to emphasize that what we do really is evidence-based. All the interventions that we recommend in the course are drawn from existing literature in psychology and behavioral science, and we've run these studies on content, on our content or very closely related content, and you'll see that Laurie is actually a co-author on these 3 papers. So what? So we have all this information about what we think will be most effective to help kids feel better. We have these studies that we've run. What are we doing with that? Well, we've got a free online course for teens called The Science of Wellbeing for Teens. It's a free online course. It's got 120,000 people enrolled now, and it came out earlier this year, I think on January 2nd. And then we have a free curriculum for teachers called Teaching Happiness that contains the curriculum, the videos from The Science of Wellbeing, and a couple of other supplementary materials. And we've got 5,000 users right now, and it launched in, I think, on September 1st. So that's pretty exciting for us. But how'd we get there? How'd we get to the point where we have 120,000 people enrolled in our online course, 5,000 teachers signed up for our website? This is our product development model, and it's really simple. You'll probably see, if you know the product development space at all, that there are probably similarities between this and books that you've read or more popular frameworks like Lean Startup, if you have heard of it. My training's in philosophy, not in product development. I've kind of learned this on the job. So this is how I think about our work. First step for all of our products is to listen, to notice what people seem to want. Then the next step is to prove out what people want, to test whether we're right in kind of a closed setting. It's low risk. And then if we're right, to build, to scale it up. So listen, prove, build. How has this gone with adults? Well, the first thing that Laurie did back in 2018, she was head of Silliman College. She had just taken this role, and the head of college at Yale is a role kind of like, if you know Harry Potter, Professor McGonagall for Gryffindor House. So she's responsible for residential life. She noticed that college students were struggling with mental health, and she checked the literature, it bared out, and it also turns out that there's a lot that psychology and behavioral science have to say about improving well-being. And so she decided to offer a class called Psychology and the Good Life. The goal of Psychology and the Good Life was to kind of prove out whether offering a class on theory and practice of improving well-being would actually help people. And it turns out it did. The course was extremely successful. It turned out to be the highest enrollment class in Yale's 300-year history. It had something like 1,200 undergraduates enrolled. They had to move it to a concert hall. And the New York Times picked it up. It got a lot of press attention, which was fabulous and exciting for the kind of impact it was able to have. And now that the course bore out in a closed classroom setting at Yale, she decided to build it out into a more public, open format. That turned into her Coursera course, The Science of Wellbeing, and her podcast, The Happiness Lab. So how has this gone for teens? Well, the first thing that we noticed back in 2020, maybe late 2019, was that high school teachers were starting to use The Science of Wellbeing and the Happiness Lab. We were getting emails from administrators saying, Laurie, this is amazing work, and we want to do this for our kids. And at the time, we had no response. So the first thing that we decided to do based on this interest was build something out in kind of a closed environment. And I'll go into more detail on these programs soon. But the first thing that we did was rolled out a version of Psychology and the Good Life in schools. It was in something like 30 classrooms, I think. And then we brought it online into a more open format, so any teacher who wanted it could use it, but they had to prove that they were a teacher. Then, since then, in the last year, we've rolled it out much more widely in the public, which resulted in the Science of Wellbeing for Teens and our Teaching Happiness curriculum, which is very open, very low friction. Any teacher can use this for free. So I want to go back to the beginning of our work with high school teachers. Like I mentioned, at the very beginning, we saw that teachers were kind of hacking together the solution that they wished they had. These are screenshots of the Science of Wellbeing on Coursera. You can see there's about 4.6 million people enrolled at the time that I took the screenshot yesterday. And this is the logo of the Happiness Lab podcast. We were hearing that teachers really wanted something custom. So what we did was we wanted to be able to quickly respond to this demand from teachers. So on the one hand, they were just excited about about what this course could do for kids, but also, if you remember back to the beginning of 2020, this was the very beginning of the pandemic, and there were really serious needs from teachers. And so we did a couple of things immediately. The first, in order to set up this program, we had content, we knew the course we wanted to offer, but we didn't have relationships with schools, and we didn't have a way to offer credit. And we wanted to do that because what we knew how to do was run college courses. So we partnered with the University of Connecticut and with the National Education Equity Lab to be able to offer a for credit course for free to Title I students in 30 schools in 17 cities across the states, I think. And this was great. We had essential partners lined up. It was something that we knew how to do, and we had partners for the parts that we didn't know how to do. It was a proven product because we've run this course before, and it was a quick response to pandemic needs. So we saw that that was successful. Students passed the course. Teachers were very happy with it. We learned about what worked and what didn't. And so we decided, in order to scale this more easily, we wanted to take it online. We removed the for credit feature and instead opened up all of the course materials to any teacher who wanted it, as long as they could prove that they were a teacher. That meant like having an EDU address, for instance. So it was invitation only. They had to request an invitation. We included a pre and a post survey to measure students' well-being. We had a couple of measures that I could mention later if that's useful. We had a little almost digital booklet of crowdsourced classroom activities from teachers. It was offered in a flexible format, so there were 16 weeks worth of video lectures, which is about 16 hours, but teachers could use these truly however they wanted. If they taught math but just wanted to have a 1-week unit each year on well-being, they could do that. Or if they taught AP Psych or had their own well-being course or just wanted to teach Psych and the Good Life. There was a pretty high barrier to entry, and there's a good reason for that I'll explain later. They had to fill out a 35-question, very detailed survey in order to access the curriculum. And we actually had about 2,000 teachers become users on this website. So that told us how important this was to folks. Together, this let us figure out what our teachers' needs really, given a flexible format. What sticks? What are people excited to do? People who used this were pretty excited about it, which meant that they were our super users. We knew they were our early adopters. They were excited about this. And building in feedback mechanisms, like just having an email address available, let us identify what are the content gaps for teens. So altogether, even though this wasn't quite the final product we imagined, it was something that would allow us to learn quite a bit and identify the right people to work with. I'm going to slow down a little bit. This all paved the way to the Science of Wellbeing for Teens, which we launched like I said, in January of this year. It is a free 6-week online course for teens. There's 6 units, 42 videos. We have weekly happiness homework assignments, which prompt students to practice outside of the course what they want to, what they can work on to improve their well-being. It's totally asynchronous and free and voluntary, so teens can take it on their own time at their own will. And it's gotten a little bit of press, which is exciting. This positioned us to be able to, for the first time, target teens directly. All of the rest of our materials were being siphoned to teens through classroom settings. And the other thing was that we knew teachers really wanted this. The Psychology in the Good Life, we were really lucky that we had this. It was raw footage taken from the back of the classroom in Psychology in the Good Life at Yale, which is to say it was a college course. So it focused on questions like, what can I do to ensure that I prioritize getting the right kind of job? So not necessarily one with a high salary, but one that allows me to have personal time and use my strengths. And rather than focusing on questions about marriage, we made it questions about relationships writ large, which included maybe the first relationship you ever have, which would be in high school. And that curriculum, that course allowed us to set up a completely open, totally tailored, free curriculum for high school teachers. By completely open, I mean there's no 35 question survey. This is really intended for teachers, but all we ask for is an email and password. We provide a pre and a post survey that teachers can use before their implementation and after it's finished. We take advantage of, I think, 3 measures. One is called EPOC, which is the teen version of a pretty well-known instrument called PERMA. We use something for CADS, called CADS, K-A-D-S, which measures student anxiety and depression. And then we make use of the VIA Signature Strength Survey, VIA, which helps us measure improvements in students' character development. So altogether, this platform allowed us to reach more teachers. I personally built this curriculum site on Laurie's personal website, which means that there's a lot of cross-pollination between products. So people who come to their website because they're excited about her adult class or about their podcast and happen to be a teacher will see, hey, there's a curriculum here. It also positions us to be able to directly provide implementation guidance from other teachers. The mechanism that allows us to do that is that we built an exclusive Facebook community just for our teachers, and they need to prove using a password-protected passcode that they're actually using our curriculum. So what that yields is a curriculum of highly motivated people who are actually doing this stuff. There are some advantages to taking that model, and I'll get them to them in a second. But another thing that I want to mention is that we've got at a high level between products our listen, prove, build flow. We also have that within products though. So for instance, with Psychology in the Good Life Online, what we heard was from teachers was that they were excited about the content. Teachers we weren't working with wanted to be able to access the content. That all indicated we need something bigger than this. And so the first thing that we did to prove that out was to create just 1 week out of 16 weeks, just 1 week as a closed beta of content. And we invited a small cohort of teachers who were really excited and had like written us long emails being like, oh my God, this is amazing, I want this. We invited that cohort to explore the beta and fill out like a 40-question survey and then join a live call to discuss what they thought of this open format, how we structured the content, whether this would work for them, whether it wouldn't. And so this is within one product. We had the listen, we have the prove it out, and then we built Psychology in the Good Life Online and rolled it out widely to any teacher who wanted to use it. And that's been really fruitful. And I'll talk about the advantages of it in just a second. I'm getting to the end here. So actually, I'm going to go back for 1 second. I'm getting to the end here. So what I'd love for everyone to think about is what questions do you have? We'll have about 5 minutes for questions, and I would love to know what you're thinking, what you're excited about. The only caveat is that I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not qualified and really not allowed to give mental health advice. I'm also not a teacher. I've done a little bit of teaching before, but I can't give you the kind of advice that someone who has done this in the classroom can give you. What I can do is I can tell you a little bit more about the content. I can tell you some of the challenges people have run into, and I can definitely give you, this is my wheelhouse, give you advice and feedback on how to build stuff like this. So with that said, I'm going to get to the last 5 lessons that I want to include here. They're really quick little fortune cookies, and they didn't have a home, so I'm calling these tidbits. The first is a piece of advice. It's to leverage your strengths. When you're building stuff like this, you want to start with expertise or resources that you already have. And for ones you don't have yet, you want to find partners. That's something that's really worked for us well. The second is that you always want to fight downhill. You don't want to pick uphill battles. And the way that this bears out for us is that you want to build things that people have already asked for, because that guarantees an audience of at least one. And that's what you're listening for. When you pick up on something when you're listening, that's the kind of thing that you want to prove out to your audience of at least one. The third is that you always want to invest in community. And that is especially important if you have a small team or limited resources. Community, I've been really diving into this and preaching it a lot lately, but community can play so many roles. It can play the role of customer service. It can play the role of product research. And it can be an insane growth lever. And so the way this works is in our Facebook group, if someone runs into an issue, they can ask the group and the group can help them. If someone wants something, they'll say it loudly and we'll hear that in the group. And what happens when you have a community and a cohort of motivated, excited early adopters is that they will talk about it. They'll feel that for the first time, there's this thing that's exciting to them, and they've found their people. They've found other people who this is exciting for too. And that will make them talk and spread the word. And that is invaluable when you've got limited resources. And the fourth is to start with small cohorts. This was very counterintuitive to me when we started our work, but I can't recommend this more highly. When you start with small cohorts, rather than immediately rolling things out big, it really reduces the pressure to build something that's perfect. And it lets you prioritize deep qualitative feedback over shallow quantitative feedback. Shallow quantitative feedback from a ton of people will put you in a position where it feels like you're drinking water from a fire hose. There's just going to be too much to work with, and it will be hard to find signal through the noise and know who among these people are the ones whose feedback you should really be prioritizing. When you have a small cohort, you can dig deep with people and not just ask them for numbers or feedback through surveys. You can actually have conversations with them and hear from them about, like, okay, you're a motivated, inspired person to use this product. What's making this click for you? My last piece of advice is to require high commitment. This is also counterintuitive, but if you require a high level of commitment from early adopters, that's going to confirm how badly people really want your thing. And it's going to ensure that you have the right people in your cohort. If you're not requiring a high level of commitment at the very beginning, then I think you're liable to be led astray by what are called unqualified leads. People who express something that looks like passion and looks like excitement and might not actually be, because it turns out they didn't need to work that hard to get through the door. If you end up with a cohort of people who had to work to get there, you're going to be able to rely on their feedback and know that you've got a good base for growth. So that is all that I have to say today. I'm really happy to have been here. It's been a treat to share all of this with you, and I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing some questions. Feel free to reach out to me if you have questions or thoughts or looking for ideas. My email address is right here. I also have a personal website. It's at alexmarmor.com. But the most important thing, which I wanted to save for last, is that you really ought to check out our curriculum. And I feel like I can say that in full confidence because we don't make money off this thing. So the curriculum you can find at drlauriesantos.com/teaching happiness with a dash between teaching and happiness. And I'm sure we can drop that in the chat. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alex, for sharing your nugs of whiz today. And again, I encourage anyone who's listening to ask Alex questions, in particular around content, right? Challenges that you may have, and also how to build out these systems, right? So go ahead and ask that question.